The security guard never saw him coming. As the vault door swung open, revealing millions in cash, David Parker's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to do. His daughter's medication sat unopened on their kitchen counter, the past due notices plastered across their apartment. If you're wondering how a former accountant with a spotless record ended up here, about to commit the crime of the century, keep watching. This isn't just another heist story, this is about how far a father will go when the system fails his child. If this opening grabbed your attention, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories that explore the desperate choices good people make when backed against a wall. David Parker stared at the eviction notice taped to his apartment door, the bold red letters blurring as tears filled his eyes. Inside, his 8-year-old daughter Lily was sleeping, unaware that they had less than 72 hours before they'd be homeless. Her small chest rose and fell rhythmically, the rare peaceful sleep that came between her painful episodes. The rare genetic disorder that had taken his wife 3 years ago was now threatening their daughter. The experimental treatment that could save her cost $287,000, money that insurance wouldn't cover and that no bank would loan to a single father who'd lost his accounting job when he started missing too many days caring for his sick child. "I promised her, Emma," he whispered to his late wife's photograph on the nightstand. "I promised we wouldn't lose her too." David had tried everything legitimate. 2 jobs. GoFundMe campaigns. Begging pharmaceutical companies for compassionate use. Nothing had worked. The world had forgotten about them, and time was running out. That night, as Lily suffered through another painful episode, something inside David broke. He held her small hand as she whimpered, her body racked with pain that no child should ever experience. "It hurts, Daddy," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart. But I'm going to fix it. I promise." After she finally fell asleep, David opened his laptop. His former accounting firm had handled the finances for Meridian Bank, one of the largest private banks in the city. He still remembered the security protocols, the shift changes, the vault codes that rotated on a predictable schedule. He'd noticed the flaws in their system years ago but had never said anything. Why would he? He was an honest man. But honest men didn't watch their children die when there was another option. The plan took shape over 6 weeks. David's background in accounting made him methodical, precise. He created spreadsheets tracking guard rotations, security camera blind spots, and the bank's cash delivery schedule. He studied architectural plans, ventilation systems, and electrical layouts. What he lacked in criminal experience, he made up for in desperation and intelligence. He wasn't a criminal mastermind, he was a father who couldn't afford to fail. During the day, he'd take Lily to her treatments, watching her grow weaker as the affordable but ineffective medications failed to stop her disease's progression. At night, after tucking her in, he'd transform their kitchen table into a planning center, mapping out what would become either their salvation or his downfall. "Mr. Parker?" Lily's doctor had pulled him aside during their last visit. "I don't want to alarm you, but Lily's condition is accelerating. Without the specialized treatment, I'm afraid we're looking at months, not years." That night, David finalized his plan. He wasn't just stealing money, he was stealing time for his daughter. The most difficult part wasn't the planning, it was finding someone to watch Lily during the 12 hours he'd need to execute the heist. His neighbor Mrs. Gonzalez had become like a grandmother to Lily after Emma died. When David asked if she could watch Lily overnight, claiming he had a job interview in another city, she agreed without hesitation. "You're a good father, David," she told him, patting his arm. "Emma would be proud of how hard you're fighting for your little girl." The words cut through him like a knife. Would Emma be proud of what he was about to do? Or would she be horrified that her husband had become a criminal? The night before the heist, David sat on the edge of Lily's bed, watching her sleep. Her once rosy cheeks were pale, her small body too thin. On her nightstand sat a collection of drawings, her future plans. A house with a garden. A dog. Herself as a doctor, helping other sick children. "I just want you to have a future," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Any future at all." The morning of the heist, David dropped Lily at Mrs. Gonzalez's apartment. Lily hugged him tightly, as if sensing something was different. "I love you to the moon and back, Daddy," she said, their special phrase. "And I love you to the stars and beyond," he replied, his voice nearly breaking. He'd chosen a Friday for the heist, the day when cash reserves were highest for weekend withdrawals. He'd also chosen the branch across town, where he was less likely to be recognized. David parked 3 blocks away and walked to the bank, dressed in a maintenance uniform he'd purchased online. His heart pounded so loudly he was certain everyone could hear it. In his pocket was a fake ID badge that would get him into the service entrance. In his bag were tools that would help him access the electrical system. The first part of his plan went smoothly. The service entrance guard barely glanced at his ID before waving him through. David made his way to the utility room, where he carefully disabled the backup generator that would kick in if the main power failed. Then he waited. At exactly 3:17 p.m., when the bank was at its busiest and the afternoon shift change was happening, David triggered a power surge that plunged the entire building into darkness. In the confusion that followed, he slipped into the restricted area, using the temporary code he'd calculated would be in effect during this exact window. The vault was his target, specifically, the temporary holding area where the weekend cash was kept before being distributed to the teller stations. David had exactly 4 minutes before the emergency systems would reboot. As he entered the code into the secondary vault, his hands trembled. Images of Lily flashed through his mind, her smile when she was having a good day, her brave face during treatments, the way she still planned for a future she might never see. The vault door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, more money than David had ever seen. He wouldn't take it all, just enough. $300,000 would cover Lily's treatment and give them enough to start over somewhere new. As he filled his bag, David heard footsteps approaching. He froze, certain he'd been caught. But the security guard walked past the door, flashlight beam sweeping the hallway. David finished packing the money and slipped out through his planned escape route, a service corridor that led to the loading dock. As he walked calmly away from the bank, the emergency sirens began to wail behind him. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. That night, as police reports about the heist dominated the local news, David sat with Lily in Mrs. Gonzalez's living room, his bag of stolen cash hidden in their apartment. "Did your interview go well, Daddy?" Lily asked, leaning against him weakly. David swallowed hard. "I think so, sweetheart. I think things are going to get better for us soon." Later, after carrying his sleeping daughter back to their apartment, David counted the money. $328,000. Enough for Lily's treatment and a fresh start. But as the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what he'd done hit him. He was a thief now. A criminal. If caught, he'd go to prison, and Lily would be alone. The money would save her life, but at what cost? David barely slept that night, torn between elation at having the means to save his daughter and horror at what he'd become. The next morning, he called the specialist who had recommended the experimental treatment. Within days, Lily was admitted to the program, with David claiming the money had come from a private donor who wished to remain anonymous. For the first time in years, hope bloomed in their small family. The treatment was grueling, but Lily faced it with the same courage she'd shown throughout her illness. And miraculously, it began to work. Her blood tests improved. Her energy returned. The color came back to her cheeks. Meanwhile, the bank heist investigation continued. David watched the news obsessively, terrified that each day would bring police to his door. He'd been careful, so careful, but he wasn't a professional criminal. Had he made a mistake? Left evidence? Would facial recognition software identify him from a security camera he'd missed? 2 months after the heist, as Lily continued to improve, David made a decision. He couldn't live with the constant fear. He couldn't build Lily's new life on a foundation of crime. She deserved better than a father who jumped at every knock on the door. He wrote a letter to the bank, anonymously confessing to the heist and explaining why he'd done it. He wouldn't return the money, it had already saved his daughter's life, but he promised to pay it back, somehow, someday. Then he took Lily and moved across the country, to a small town where no one knew them. He found work as a bookkeeper at a local business, using his accounting skills legitimately again. They rented a small house with a garden, just like in Lily's drawings. They even adopted a dog from the local shelter. Lily thrived. The treatment had worked better than anyone had expected. She grew stronger each day, attended school regularly for the first time in years, and made friends. Her disease wasn't cured, she would need monitoring for the rest of her life, but she had a future now. David set up a payment plan for himself. Each month, he put aside whatever he could afford, building a fund that would someday repay what he'd stolen. It would take decades, but he was committed to making it right. 3 years passed. Lily was now 11, healthy and happy. David had found peace in their new life, though he never forgot what he'd done to secure it. Then one evening, there was a knock at their door. David opened it to find 2 police officers standing on his porch. "David Parker?" one asked. David's heart sank. This was the moment he'd feared for 3 years. He glanced back at Lily, who was doing homework at the kitchen table, her face scrunched in concentration. "Yes," he said quietly. "Can I have a moment to speak to my daughter?" The officer nodded, and David went to Lily, kneeling beside her chair. "Sweetheart, I need to talk to some people outside. Stay here and finish your homework, okay?" Lily looked up, her eyes, so like her mother's, filled with trust. "Okay, Daddy. I'm almost done anyway." David kissed her forehead and walked back to the door, closing it behind him as he stepped onto the porch. "I know why you're here," he told the officers. "I'll come quietly. I just ask that you let me arrange for my neighbor to stay with my daughter until her aunt can get here from Chicago." The officers exchanged confused glances. "Sir, we're not here to arrest you," the female officer said. "We're here because of your monthly donations to the Meridian Bank Victims Fund." David stared at them, uncomprehending. "The bank traced the donations back to you," the male officer explained. They were curious about someone making regular payments to a fund for a 3-year-old robbery. "I don't understand," David said, his voice barely audible. "The bank president wants to meet with you," the female officer continued. "Apparently, your letter made quite an impression when they found it. They've been looking for you, but not to press charges." 2 days later, David sat across from Eleanor Winters, the president of Meridian Bank. She was not what he'd expected, warm, grandmotherly, with kind eyes that studied him intently. "Mr. Parker, what you did was wrong," she said directly. "But I understand why you did it. No parent should have to choose between breaking the law and saving their child." She slid a folder across the desk to him. Inside was a document stating that Meridian Bank would not press charges if David continued his repayment plan. There was also a job offer, for a position in their security department. "We need someone who can think like you did," Eleanor explained. "Someone who can see the flaws in our systems before others exploit them. And," she added with a small smile, "someone who understands that sometimes good people make desperate choices." David could barely speak through his tears. "Why would you do this?" Eleanor's expression softened. "Because I lost my daughter to cancer 20 years ago. The treatments that might have saved her didn't exist then. If they had, I can't say I wouldn't have done exactly what you did." 5 years later, David stood at the back of an auditorium, watching with pride as 16-year-old Lily accepted an award for her volunteer work with critically ill children. Healthy and strong, she had turned her own experience into a mission to help others. David now headed Meridian Bank's security division, using his unique perspective to protect the bank while also creating programs to help families facing catastrophic medical expenses. The money he'd stolen had been fully repaid, and the bank had established a foundation in Lily's name to help other children access experimental treatments. Life had come full circle in ways David could never have imagined on that desperate night when he decided to become a thief. As Lily finished her acceptance speech, she looked directly at him, her smile radiant. "Most of all, I want to thank my father, who taught me that love sometimes makes us do impossible things. Who showed me that mistakes can be redeemed, and that second chances are possible. Who risked everything so I could stand here today." The audience applauded, unaware of the true meaning behind her words. But David knew. And as Lily ran down from the stage to hug him, he finally felt the weight of his crime lift from his shoulders. He had broken the law to save his daughter. He had faced the consequences and made amends. And somehow, through it all, they had both found redemption. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share stories that explore the complex choices people make when faced with impossible situations, stories that remind us that humanity, in all its flawed glory, is capable of both desperate acts and extraordinary redemption. What would you do to save someone you love? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember that sometimes the line between right and wrong isn't as clear as we might wish.